We believe that this woman aimed to anticipate the death of the terminally ill patients, difficult patients, either because the relatives were demanding or because it was difficult to take care of the patient.
Kristen Gilbert. Kristen Gilbert didn't look like a killer. With a steady hand and calm demeanor, she blended easily into the sterile white halls of the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts. She was trusted, respected, but behind the calm face was something far more disturbing. A desire not just to heal, but to control life and death itself. In the mid-1990s, hospital staff began noticing something strange, a surge in code blue emergencies, patients going into sudden cardiac arrest. And almost every time, one name appeared on the shift sheet: Kristen Gilbert. She was often the first to respond, rushing in to administer help to save the very lives she had just endangered. It gave her praise, attention, a perverse form of glory. But behind the scenes, the truth was far more sinister. Gilbert had been injecting patients with massive, unauthorized doses of epinephrine, a drug that, in excess, causes the heart to race uncontrollably and then stop. She wasn't just playing God. She was staging the crisis, then stepping in to play the hero. Colleagues started whispering. Patients who weren't expected to die did. In one instance, a man recovering well suddenly collapsed just minutes after she entered his room. Over time, the pattern became undeniable. The VA saw a spike in patient deaths, but only during her shifts. A federal investigation followed, and when the epinephrine bottles went missing, the trail led straight to her. During her trial, prosecutors painted her as a textbook example of a nurse with a hero complex, someone who manufactured chaos to appear irreplaceable. But it was deeper than that. This was about control. About the power to decide who lived and who didn't, and then to soak in the credit when she tried to save them. She was convicted of 4 murders and 2 attempted murders. The real number may be much higher. Kristen Gilbert was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She still maintains her innocence. But for many families, the damage is irreversible. Their loved ones died not from disease, but from trust misplaced in someone who wore the uniform of a healer and acted like a god. 2. Daniela Poggiali. She smiled in photos, not just casual ones, but selfies taken next to the corpses of her own patients. Daniela Poggiali, an Italian nurse working in Lugo, Emilia-Romagna, was supposed to care for the elderly and terminally ill. Instead, she became one of Italy's most chilling medical predators. In 2014, suspicions began to grow after an unusual number of deaths occurred under Poggiali's care. Many of them elderly patients who had not been expected to die so suddenly. Hospital staff began to speak up. Colleagues noted that her patients often declined rapidly and without explanation. What they discovered next was even more disturbing. Authorities opened an investigation, and among Poggiali's belongings, they found shocking images. Selfies taken beside dead or dying patients. In one, she was grinning broadly next to a woman who had just passed away. These were not photos of grief. They were trophies. Investigators believe Poggiali administered fatal doses of potassium chloride, a substance that can stop the heart within minutes and disappears quickly from the body, making it difficult to detect during autopsy. The drug became her perfect weapon. Quiet, fast, almost untraceable. But it wasn't just the method, it was the motive. Some believe Poggiali killed to get rid of difficult patients. Others say she did it out of boredom, control, even amusement. One patient was said to have annoyed her. Another had complained too often. The line between inconvenience and death in her mind seemed dangerously thin. In 2015, Poggiali was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. But the legal process was far from over. In a bizarre twist, her conviction was later overturned on appeal due to questions about medical evidence. Then in 2021, a new trial reconvicted her for the murder of patient Rosa Calderoni, a decision that once again put her behind bars. To this day, the debate continues. How many did she really kill? And why did she take those photos? Smiling next to bodies that should have been sacred. For many, Daniela Poggiali is not just a murderer in a nurse's uniform. She is a disturbing symbol of how cruelty can hide behind routine, and how someone trusted with your final moments could turn them into a private joke. 3. Beverley Allitt. On the surface, Beverley Allitt was the kind of nurse every parent hoped would care for their sick child. gentle voice, calm presence, reassuring smile. She worked in the children's ward at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, England. But behind her soft-spoken demeanor was a hidden darkness so disturbing it would haunt the nation for decades. It began in 1991, when a series of unexplained medical emergencies began striking previously stable pediatric patients. Tiny hearts stopped without warning. Infants who had shown signs of recovery were suddenly dying. In just 59 days, 4 children were dead, and many others suffered unexplained collapses, some left permanently brain damaged. But one detail linked them all. Nurse Beverley Allitt had been on shift every single time. Allitt often appeared distraught, even heroic. She would raise alarms, attempt resuscitation, and comfort grieving families. But what no one suspected at the time was that she had caused the crises herself. Investigators later discovered that she had deliberately administered lethal doses of insulin, potassium, and air injections into her victims. And each time, she seemed to crave the drama that followed. The final clue came when one child survived, and a used syringe containing high levels of insulin was found in the waste bin. Authorities launched a full investigation. What they uncovered was a methodical pattern of medical manipulation, concealed beneath a facade of care. Psychiatrists suggested Allitt suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychological disorder where caregivers intentionally harm others to gain attention, sympathy, or a sense of control. But many questioned whether that diagnosis was too kind. What kind of mind calmly injects air into a baby's bloodstream and watches as they die? In 1993, Beverley Allitt was convicted of 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 6 counts of grievous bodily harm. She was sentenced to 13 life terms and remains detained at Rampton Secure Hospital, a facility for the criminally insane. To this day, she is one of the UK's most notorious female serial killers. What makes her crimes so chilling isn't just the number of victims, but the fact that she chose the most innocent targets imaginable and did it all while wearing the mask of compassion. Number 4. Genene Jones. Genene Jones worked in pediatric intensive care, a place where miracles were fought for, where every breath mattered. To the parents who trusted her with their infants, she was supposed to be a lifeline. But beneath the nurse's scrubs and friendly Texan charm was something much darker. Something the state of Texas still struggles to understand or forgive. It started in the late 1970s and early 80s at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio. Staff began to notice an alarming pattern. A sudden spike in infant deaths, many of them inexplicable. Babies who had been recovering would suddenly crash, their bodies seizing, their breathing halted. Code after code, always when Genene Jones was on duty. The staff grew uneasy, but instead of launching a full investigation, the hospital quietly allowed Jones to resign, fearing scandal, lawsuits, and loss of reputation. It was a decision that would haunt them, because her next job was at a small pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas. There, the deaths continued. And this time, one mother fought back. After the death of her child, Chelsea McClellan, suspicions grew. An autopsy revealed massive amounts of succinylcholine, a drug used to paralyze patients during surgery. Jones had no medical reason to administer it. She was arrested, and what followed shocked the nation. During her trial, prosecutors described a woman who intentionally induced medical emergencies, then tried to save the child in front of others. She created danger just to appear heroic. A twisted need for validation that left dozens of infants dead or permanently injured. In 1984, Genene Jones was convicted of murder and injury to a child. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison, but due to a Texas law at the time, she was set for early release. In response, prosecutors reopened several cold cases. In 2020, at age 70, she pleaded guilty to a second murder and received a life sentence, ensuring she would never walk free. Jones is believed to have been responsible for the deaths of at least 60 infants, making her one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. But the most haunting part? For years she operated in plain sight, trusted, respected, and protected by silence. She didn't sneak in through the shadows. She was already inside, and Texas will never forget. 5. Heather Pressdee. Heather Pressdee once held the hand of the dying, comforted the ill, and reassured families that their loved ones were safe. As a registered nurse in Pennsylvania, she was trained to heal. But behind that calm bedside manner was something far more chilling. The belief that she alone could decide who lived and who didn't. Between 2020 and 2023, an alarming number of patients under Pressdee's care suddenly declined. Not from their illnesses, but from massive insulin overdoses, even when they weren't diabetic. Some slipped into comas, others died quickly. And all of them had one thing in common: they were in her care. Authorities were slow to piece it together, because the patients were elderly, chronically ill, or already near the end of life. But something wasn't right. Families began asking questions. One by one, complaints surfaced. And when the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office finally launched an investigation, what they uncovered would stun even seasoned prosecutors. Heather Pressdee was not just neglectful, she was methodical. According to investigators, she had intentionally administered lethal doses of insulin to at least 17 patients, resulting in multiple deaths. Even more disturbing were her text messages, where she vented frustrations about patients and bragged about her ability to end suffering. In her own words, she just wanted peace and quiet on the floor. Some patients, she claimed, were miserable anyway. To her, death wasn't a tragedy, it was a convenience. She played judge, jury, and executioner, all in scrubs. Arrested in 2023, Heather Pressdee was charged with multiple counts of homicide and attempted murder. In May 2024, she pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 19 counts of attempted murder, receiving 3 consecutive life sentences, plus over 380 years in prison. The case shocked a nation already reeling from other so-called angel of death nurses. But what made Pressdee's crimes particularly horrifying was the cold detachment. No remorse, no moral struggle, just clinical efficiency, and a trail of grieving families left behind. She wasn't overwhelmed, she wasn't delusional, she was decisive. And for a time, nobody questioned her. After all, she wore the uniform. She knew the system, and she smiled while playing God. 6. Brenda Cecilia Agüero. At first glance, Brenda Cecilia Agüero appeared to be everything a pediatric nurse should be: calm, composed, attentive. She worked in the neonatal unit of the Ramon Carrillo Hospital in Córdoba Province, Argentina, where she was trusted to care for the most fragile lives imaginable, newborns. But in 2022, a horrific pattern began to emerge, and Brenda's white coat began to look more like a mask than a uniform. Within a few short months, 5 healthy infants suddenly died under suspicious circumstances, and at least 8 more experienced near-fatal complications. The official cause of death in many cases? Hypokalemia, a sudden, drastic drop in potassium levels. But these babies weren't sick, they weren't in danger, they were thriving, until they weren't. Behind the scenes, hospital staff began to whisper. Why were these tragedies happening only during Agüero's shifts? Why the medical codes and cardiac arrests were always linked to her rounds? The tipping point came when an autopsy revealed something chilling. Lethal levels of potassium and insulin had been injected into a baby who was otherwise healthy. The hospital launched an internal investigation, but the death toll continued to rise. When the case was finally handed to authorities, a forensic analysis confirmed what many had feared. Brenda Cecilia Agüero was not saving babies, she was murdering them. Arrested in August 2022, she was charged with 5 counts of aggravated homicide and 8 counts of attempted murder. Prosecutors allege she injected the infants with unprescribed potassium or insulin, causing sudden cardiac arrests. The motive? Still unclear. Some speculate a desire for attention, a god complex, or even emotional instability. Others believe it was simply the thrill of power, the ultimate control over life and death. In custody, Agüero has maintained her innocence, but the evidence tells a different story. A series of baby deaths, all linked by time, method, and proximity, and by one nurse who should never have been allowed near a needle. Argentina was left reeling. In a country already grappling with trust in public institutions, the idea that a caregiver in a children's hospital could quietly become a serial killer was too much to bear. She didn't need a weapon, just a syringe, a quiet moment, and misplaced trust. And now the families of those infants live with a pain few could ever comprehend. The kind that comes when someone you trusted to save your child is the one who took them away. 7. Vickie Dawn Jackson. In the quiet town of Nocona, Texas, the hospital was more than just a place of healing. It was the heartbeat of the community. People knew their nurses by name, trusted them with their lives. And for a long time, Vickie Dawn Jackson fit the image of the ideal caregiver. Soft-spoken, friendly, and seemingly devoted to her work. But behind the calm demeanor was a secret so chilling, it would shock the entire state. Between December 2000 and February 2001, 10 elderly patients at Nocona General Hospital died suddenly and unexpectedly. All were in stable condition. All were being cared for during Jackson's shifts. And all, investigators would later discover, had been injected with mivacurium, a powerful paralytic drug used during intubation that causes respiratory arrest if administered improperly. No one suspected a thing at first. Deaths in a small-town hospital, especially among elderly patients, don't always raise red flags. But a pattern began to emerge. And when an anonymous tip led authorities to test the patient's tissues, the truth unraveled. Jackson wasn't just present, she was the common link. Hospital staff described her as always there when a patient coded, and some even admitted to feeling uneasy without knowing why. One nurse recalled Jackson saying chilling words after a patient passed, "They're better off now." Prosecutors believe she killed at least 10, but may have attempted even more. Her motive remains elusive. Some speculated it was a desire for control. Others believed she enjoyed the attention that came from trying to save patients she herself had pushed to the brink. It was the ultimate game of life and death, and Jackson held all the cards. During her trial in 2006, she showed little emotion. No remorse, no tears, just silence. She was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, she has never explained why she did it. What makes the case of Vickie Dawn Jackson so haunting isn't just the body count, it's the betrayal of trust. These were not strangers on a battlefield or casualties of war. These were grandparents, neighbors, loved ones, who died in hospital beds under warm blankets, believing they were safe. And the woman by their side, who held their hand in their final moments, was the very reason they died. 8. Irene Becker. In one of Berlin's most respected hospitals, where white coats and sterile halls gave the illusion of safety, Irene Becker walked the corridors like any other nurse. No one questioned her. No one watched too closely. She was efficient, calm, and always ready to help. But as the months passed, whispers turned into alarms. Patients were dying. Quietly, suddenly, and too frequently, especially during her shifts. Becker worked in the geriatrics and intensive care units, where patients were often vulnerable. At first, the deaths seemed natural: old age, heart failure, complications. But something didn't add up. Colleagues began to notice that otherwise stable patients would deteriorate quickly after being under Becker's care. In 2006, suspicions finally led to action. Authorities launched a covert investigation and soon uncovered the horrifying truth. Becker had been injecting elderly patients with lethal doses of insulin, even when they had no history of diabetes. The sudden blood sugar crashes were often fatal and nearly impossible to detect without specific tests. Some patients were found cold, sweating, barely conscious, their organs shutting down. Others were already gone. When she was finally arrested, Becker confessed to at least 5 murders, though investigators believe the number could be higher. Her motive? She claimed it was out of compassion, that she wanted to end the suffering of her patients. But prosecutors saw something else, a pattern of power, of playing God, of choosing who lived and who died. Her courtroom demeanor was stoic, clinical, almost detached. No tears, no emotion. As if she were still a nurse, calmly documenting a patient's final moments, instead of being judged for causing them. Becker was convicted of multiple counts of murder and attempted murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The case ignited a national debate in Germany about oversight in hospitals and the terrifying reality of angels of death in healthcare. What makes Irene Becker's case so disturbing is the silence that surrounded it. The kind of silence only found in hospital corridors at night, broken only by the beep of machines and the faint footsteps of someone you're supposed to trust. But behind Becker's quiet professionalism was a calculated killer. And for the families who never got to say goodbye, the worst pain came from knowing their loved ones didn't die naturally. They were taken. They were trained to save lives, but they chose to take them. Across continents and decades, these women walked into hospitals wearing scrubs and carrying charts. But beneath the masks and ID badges, something darker was brewing. Power, control, ego, detachment. These weren't crimes of passion. They were crimes of calculation, hidden beneath acts of supposed care. What makes these cases so haunting isn't just the body count, it's the betrayal. A nurse is supposed to be the last person you fear, someone to hold your hand when you're vulnerable, someone to ease the pain. But these women twisted that sacred role into something sinister. They didn't just break trust, they weaponized it. Some claimed they were ending suffering. Others denied everything. A few smiled, calm and cold, as the verdicts were read. But whether it was epinephrine, insulin, air bubbles, or sedatives, the result was the same. Patients who should have gone home in wheelchairs left in coffins instead. And the question lingers. Was this evil, or the coldest kind of psychological fracture? Not all monsters wear masks or wield knives. Some carry stethoscopes, some whisper kindly, and some smile as they end a life. Which story disturbed you the most, and why? Was it the nurse who posed for selfies next to her victims? The one who injected babies? Or the one who stayed calm while bodies piled up on her floor? Let us know in the comments. And if these stories stayed with you, like, share, and subscribe, because the more we remember, the less we ignore. And the more we question, the harder it is for cruelty to hide. Thank you for watching, and always remember, trust is a dangerous thing.